The night my family kicked me out, my mother said something I will never forget. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You'll never be anything, Ethan. You're not worth fighting for." Then my father opened the front door and pointed outside. I stood there in silence, holding one small backpack. No money, no plan, no place to go. Just the cold night air and the feeling that the people who were supposed to love me had already erased me from their lives. What they didn't know was that 10 years later, they would be the ones standing at my door. And this time, they wouldn't be the ones in control. My name is Ethan Miller, and I was 18 years old the night my family threw me out. Looking back now, I realize that night didn't destroy my life. It built it. But at the time, it felt like everything was over. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else. My father owned a small construction company, and my older brother Daniel was the golden child. Daniel was perfect in their eyes. Straight-A student, captain of the football team, the kind of son parents bragged about. Me? I was the opposite. Not because I was a bad kid, but because I never fit the mold my parents wanted. I loved building things, fixing things, taking machines apart and putting them back together. But my grades weren't perfect, and that was enough for my parents to decide I was a disappointment. For years, I lived in Daniel's shadow. Every dinner conversation compared us. Why can't you be more like your brother? Daniel works harder than you. Daniel has a future. Eventually, I stopped trying to explain myself. Nothing I said mattered anyway. But the real breaking point came during my senior year of high school. Daniel had just been accepted into a prestigious college. My parents threw a huge party for him. Relatives, neighbors, co-workers, everyone came to celebrate. And, of course, the comparisons started again. My uncle laughed and asked me in front of everyone, "So, Ethan, are you even going to college?" I shrugged. "I'm still figuring things out." My father shook his head immediately. "That means no." People laughed, the kind of laugh that stings because it's half joke, half truth. But the truth was, I did have a plan. I had been secretly applying for a mechanical apprenticeship program in another city, a program where you learned engineering by actually building things, not just sitting in classrooms. I thought my parents would understand if I explained it. I was wrong. When I finally told them about the apprenticeship offer, my father exploded. "You want to be a mechanic?" he shouted. "It's engineering," I said. "It's not college," he replied coldly. My mother looked even more disappointed. "Daniel is going to become a lawyer," she said quietly. "And you want to fix machines?" I tried to stay calm. "It's a career, and the program pays while you train." But my father had already made up his mind. "You're embarrassing this family." Those words hit harder than anything else. The argument kept getting worse. Voices got louder. My brother stood in the corner watching silently, not defending me, not saying anything at all. Then my father said the sentence that changed everything. "If you walk away from college, you're not staying in this house." The room went quiet. I stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely." My mother nodded slowly beside him. "You need to learn responsibility." Responsibility. The word sounded ridiculous at that moment. I had been working part-time jobs since I was 16. I had saved money. I had a plan. But none of that mattered, because it wasn't their plan. "So you're kicking me out?" I asked. My father walked to the front door and opened it. "That depends," he said. "Are you going to college?" I looked at the door, then back at him, and for the first time in my life, I made a decision without caring what they thought. "No." My father pointed outside. "Then leave." My mother crossed her arms. "You'll come back in a month," she said confidently. "When you realize how hard the real world is." I grabbed my backpack from my room. Everything I owned that mattered fit inside it. When I came back downstairs, my father was still standing by the door, waiting. I paused for a moment. Part of me hoped someone would stop me. Maybe my mom, maybe even Daniel. But no one said a word. So I walked outside. The door closed behind me. And just like that, my family was gone. I remember sitting on the curb for almost an hour, thinking about what just happened, feeling angry, scared, lost, but something else too, free. Because for the first time in my life, No one could control what I did next. That night, I slept at a bus station. The next morning, I used the last of my savings to buy a bus ticket to the city where the apprenticeship program was located. It wasn't glamorous. I worked brutal hours, lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, and sometimes ate instant noodles for weeks. But slowly, things started changing. I learned faster than anyone else in the program. Machines made sense to me in a way textbooks never did. Within 2 years, I became one of the top trainees. Within 5 years, I was designing mechanical systems for manufacturing companies. And within 8 years, I had started my own engineering company. By the time 10 years passed, the kid my family called a failure was running a business worth millions. But the strangest part of my story isn't how successful I became. It's what happened next. Because one evening, 10 years after the night I was thrown out, someone knocked on my door. And when I opened it, I saw 3 faces I hadn't seen in a decade. My mother, my father, and my brother, Daniel. They looked older, tired, desperate, and my father said the last thing I ever expected to hear from him. "Ethan, we need your help." When I opened the door that night, for a moment I honestly thought I was imagining things. 10 years, that's how long it had been since I last saw my family. 10 years since my father pointed at the door and told me to leave. And now, they were standing on the other side of mine. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. My father looked older. And my brother, Daniel, the golden child, looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in months. For several seconds, none of us spoke. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Ethan, we need your help." Those words sounded strange coming from him. The man who once told me I would never be anything. I leaned against the door frame, crossing my arms. "That's interesting," I said calmly. Daniel shifted awkwardly. My mother forced a nervous smile. "Can we come in?" 10 years ago, I probably would have said yes immediately. Back then, I still wanted their approval. But now I simply looked at them, standing there, uncomfortable, waiting. "No," I said. The words seemed to surprise them. My father frowned slightly. "We came a long way." "I'm sure you did." My mother stepped forward. "Ethan, please, we just want to talk." I studied their faces for a moment. Then I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "If you want to talk," I said, "we can talk out here." The evening air was quiet. A soft wind moved through the trees in front of my house. My father glanced at the house behind me. It was a large, modern home on the edge of the city. Glass windows, 2 floors, a wide driveway. The kind of place nobody in our old neighborhood could have imagined me owning. Daniel looked at it too. Then he looked back at me. "You did well for yourself," he said quietly. I shrugged. "I worked." My father cleared his throat again. "Well, we heard about your company." That caught my attention. "Oh?" My mother nodded quickly. "You're very successful now." Funny. 10 years ago, they couldn't imagine I would survive a month on my own. Now they were talking about my success like they had always believed in me. "So," I said slowly, "why are you here?" My father hesitated, and for the first time in my life, he looked nervous around me. Daniel answered instead. "Dad's company is in trouble." I raised an eyebrow. "The construction company?" He nodded. "It's almost bankrupt." That surprised me more than I expected. My father had always been proud of that business. It was the one thing he truly believed made him successful. "What happened?" I asked. Daniel sighed. "Bad investments, a few lawsuits, and then the market slowed down." My mother added quietly, "We tried to fix it." My father looked at the ground. But it wasn't enough. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then I asked the obvious question. "And that has something to do with me?" My father finally looked up again. "Yes." Daniel stepped closer. "Your company designs industrial mechanical systems, right?" "Yes. And some of those systems are used in construction equipment." I nodded slowly. "I see where this is going." My father took a deep breath. "There's a project. A big one. If we get the contract, the company survives." "And if you don't?" I asked. Daniel answered quietly. "We lose everything." My mother quickly added, "The house. The business. Everything." For a moment, I just watched them. 10 years ago, they told me I would fail in the real world. Now they were asking me to save theirs. The irony wasn't lost on me. "So let me understand this," I said. You came here because you want my company to help your construction company win a contract. My father nodded. Yes. And you think I'm just going to agree? Daniel looked uncomfortable. We're family. The word hung in the air. Family. I almost laughed. Family? My voice stayed calm, but colder than before. Do you remember the last thing you said to me 10 years ago? My father's face tightened slightly, but he didn't answer, so I reminded him. You said I was embarrassing the family. Silence. You said I would come crawling back in a month. My mother looked away. You told me I would never be anything. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. That was a long time ago. Yes, I said. 10 years. My father stepped forward. People change. Do they? He nodded. We were hard on you. That's one way to describe it. My mother finally looked at me again. We regret it. Her voice sounded softer than I expected. We should have supported you. Daniel nodded slowly. You proved us wrong. I studied their faces carefully, trying to figure out if this was genuine or just desperation. Then my father said something that made everything feel even stranger. If you help us with this contract, we can rebuild the company. And you could come back. I blinked. Come back to the family business. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood him. You're offering me a job? Daniel shook his head quickly. No, not just a job. My father straightened his shoulders. A leadership position. I couldn't stop myself from smiling slightly. 10 years ago, they kicked me out because I didn't want the future they planned for me. Now they were asking me to help rebuild it. Why me? I asked. Daniel answered honestly. Because you're the only one who can. That sentence hung in the quiet evening air, and for the first time since they arrived, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just curiosity. Because there was something they didn't know yet, something that was about to change this entire conversation, but I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. For a few seconds after Daniel said I was the only one who could help them, none of us spoke. The street was quiet. A car passed in the distance, and the 3 people who once threw me out of their lives were now standing in front of my house, asking for my help. 10 years ago, I would have done anything to hear them say they needed me. Now, I wasn't so sure. I studied my father's face carefully. He looked tired, not just physically, but emotionally. The confident man I remembered from my childhood, the one who always acted like he had everything under control, was gone. In his place stood someone desperate. My mother looked the same way. Her eyes moved between me and the house behind me like she still couldn't believe where I was living. Daniel, though, was the most interesting one to watch. Because unlike my parents, he wasn't pretending. He looked ashamed. So, I finally said, you want my company's help with this contract? My father nodded quickly. Yes. What kind of contract? Daniel answered immediately. A city redevelopment project. That made me raise an eyebrow. Downtown? He nodded. Yes. Now I understood why they were desperate. The downtown redevelopment project had been one of the biggest construction opportunities in the state for the past 2 years. Every major construction company had been trying to secure it. The project involved redesigning several industrial buildings and upgrading large mechanical systems inside them. Exactly the kind of systems my company specialized in. So you want my engineering team to partner with your construction company? I said. Yes, my father replied. With your technology and our experience, we could win the bid. I nodded slowly. And if you lose? Daniel answered quietly. The bank takes the company. That explained the desperation. Construction companies survive on large contracts, lose enough of them, and everything collapses. My father looked at me carefully. You've done well, Ethan. I didn't respond. He continued anyway. Better than we ever expected. There it was again. That backhanded compliment. I kept my voice calm. So you want my help? Yes. And in return? My father hesitated. What do you mean, in return? I repeated. What exactly do I get? Daniel looked confused. You'd be saving the family company. I shrugged. That's not exactly a benefit to me. My father crossed his arms slightly. You'd also be helping your family. I couldn't stop myself from laughing softly. The sound clearly made them uncomfortable. My family, I repeated. 10 years ago, you made it very clear I wasn't part of that anymore. My mother stepped forward. Ethan, we made a mistake. Several. She nodded slowly. Yes. Daniel spoke next. We can't change what happened. No, I said. You can't. But we can try to fix things now. He continued. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time since they arrived, I believed he meant that. But believing something doesn't mean accepting it. So here's the situation, I said calmly. You want my company's engineering systems so your construction company can win a massive contract. My father nodded. That's right. And without that contract, your business collapses. Daniel nodded too. Yes. I folded my arms. And you want me to help? Yes. The silence that followed stretched for several seconds. Then I said something they clearly didn't expect. I might. All three of them looked surprised. You will? My mother asked quickly. I said I might. My father's shoulders relaxed slightly. What do you need? Now it was my turn to take a moment before answering. Because the truth was, this situation had possibilities they hadn't considered yet. First, I said, I need to see the proposal you submitted to the city. Daniel nodded immediately. I can send it tonight. Second, I continued, I want to review your company's financial situation. My father frowned slightly. That's private. I looked directly at him. So is my company. He hesitated, then slowly nodded. Fine. And third, I added, if my company gets involved, we do it my way. Daniel looked curious. What does that mean? It means, I said, that my engineers will control the mechanical design of the project. My father didn't seem thrilled about that, but he didn't argue. And, I continued, if the project succeeds, my company becomes a permanent partner in future developments. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. That's a big commitment. Yes, I said calmly. It is. My father looked like he was calculating the situation in his head. Finally, he asked the obvious question. Why would you even consider helping us? For a moment, I didn't answer, because the real reason wasn't something I was ready to explain. Not yet. Instead, I simply said, let's just say, I'm curious to see how this plays out. Daniel looked relieved. My mother looked hopeful, and my father looked cautious. But before any of them could say anything else, I added one more sentence. And there's something else you should know. They all looked at me. What? Daniel asked. I glanced at the house behind me, then back at them. The company you're asking for help from, I paused for a moment, is a lot bigger than you think. My father frowned. What do you mean? I gave a small smile. You'll find out soon enough. Because the truth was, they believed they were asking their son for help. What they didn't realize yet was that the project they were trying to win was already connected to me in a way they couldn't possibly imagine. The look on my father's face told me he didn't like surprises. He had always been the type of man who wanted to control every situation. And right now, he clearly felt like he wasn't in control at all. What does that mean? He asked again. I gave a small shrug. It means exactly what I said. Daniel looked between us. Ethan, if there's something we should know, just tell us. For a moment, I thought about explaining everything right there on the sidewalk, but part of me wanted them to experience the same confusion I had felt 10 years ago, the feeling of not knowing what was about to happen next. You'll understand soon, I said. My father clearly didn't like that answer, but before he could push further, I stepped back toward the door. Send me the proposal and the financial records, I said. I'll review everything. Daniel nodded immediately. I'll email them tonight. Good. My mother suddenly spoke again. Ethan, thank you. Her voice sounded emotional. I didn't respond. Instead, I simply opened the door and stepped back inside my house. Good night. The door closed before they could say anything else. The moment the door shut, the quiet of the house returned. I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. For several seconds, I just stared at the ceiling. 10 years. That's how long it had taken for my family to show up again. And somehow, it still didn't feel real. A notification sound interrupted my thoughts. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Daniel had already sent the files. I opened the email. 3 attachments: the project proposal, financial statements, and the construction plan. I leaned back and began reading. Within 5 minutes, I understood something very important. The situation was worse than they had admitted. Much worse. Their company wasn't just struggling, it was drowning. Debt everywhere, overdue payments, legal disputes. If they didn't win that city contract, the company wouldn't just shrink. It would disappear, completely. And that meant something else too. If my company partnered with them on the project, I wouldn't just be helping, I would be saving them. Completely. I kept reading. The redevelopment project itself was massive. Several industrial buildings, old infrastructure, outdated mechanical systems. The city wanted everything replaced with modern high-efficiency systems, the kind my engineers designed better than anyone else, which meant my father was right about one thing. With my company involved, their chances of winning the contract would increase dramatically. But as I read further, something else caught my attention. A name. At the top of the project documentation, the development management firm overseeing the entire redevelopment project. I smiled slightly when I saw it, because my family clearly hadn't noticed it. Or if they had, they didn't understand its importance. That firm worked closely with my company on several projects already, which meant something very interesting.